Welcome to the Create Your Own Life show, Kelly Earnhardt Miller.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing awesome.
Here.
I'm doing awesome, Kelly. I really, really appreciate you hanging out with me today. I just finished your book, Drive: 9 Lessons to Win in Business and in Life. And I know you're in the middle of a busy press tour, so I appreciate you taking out some time to hang out with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this. I had a little bit of a break, so I'm rested for today's interviews, and it's been fun. The book's been out, several weeks now, so just it's fun to talk about it and fun to help people.
Absolutely. Well, I know you've kind of talked about it a lot, so I don't really want to talk about the idea of a woman in a man's world because you've kind of said that really wasn't ever a thing for you because you've always just kind of been in racing and that's always kind of been the thing. So I won't beleaguer that too much. But the thing I did find interesting is you come from a long line of racers. You know, being your grandfather Ralph, your father Dale, your brother Dale Jr. And I guess like looking at having a family name like that, Kelly, has that made that difficult, easier for you? Or what is that, I guess, kind of challenge wise coming from a long family line of racers?
Well, I think it presents, a lot of pros and cons, right? So, I mean, there's lots of pros to have a family lineage like that, and uh, it, you automatically have a lot of respect and a lot of integrity and so on in our industry. And of course, tons of challenges as well. Growing up in a famous family, growing up with a lot of expectations, and I allude to a lot of that in my book in terms of wanting to be authentic and approachable, which is something I think we struggled with, you know, through our life of living up to the Dale Earnhardt legacy and what's that supposed to look like and what can you talk about and what you can't talk about, and in my book I talk about my relationship with my dad as a dad, not Dale Earnhardt the race car driver. And so processing all that, is just having that family heritage and lineage. But it's provided us this path through NASCAR to carry forward and to carry on and to do what we do in the racing world. So it's what we've known and what we've done. So I can imagine uh everybody always says, what's it like to grow up as Dale Earnhardt's daughter? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I didn't grow up any differently. I don't have anything to compare it with. And, so I only hear stories of how other families did things versus our family. And that's what I can compare it to, right?
Yeah, and I will say I really appreciated your willingness to really just candidly talk about, what that situation was for you like growing up because those things are what make us who we are today. And one of the things that you had mentioned is you mentioned as a child were living with your mom and you had the house had burned down. You had actually end up moving in with your dad. And you said that at that point in time you realized that was one of the most important things for you was to be a big sister to Dale. And that's kind of a theme through your story. I guess how important to you was your relationship with your brother Dale?
Yeah, it's always been right there because our parents divorced when we were really young, and then we lived with our mom, and she had third shift jobs, so it's kind of the mother in place, at a really young age and looking after Dale. And then our house burned down. We moved in with our dad. He was starting his career, traveling a lot. Met Teresa, married. They were off a lot to the races, and we would be with relatives and whatnot. So it kind of was just really a natural migration and progression of our relationship to kind of be, for me anyway, to be that person that kind of looked after him. And I was the one that was, more take control, more in charge. And he was the one that didn't like conflict, just let things be. And so it was kind of naturally a good situation, for me to be the older sister and to kind of look over his shoulder. And we've continued to this day doing business together and me managing his career and he being able to focus on what he enjoys from the racing aspect and now the broadcasting aspect and me to really focus on the business aspect of what we do together. So it's unusual because a lot of people, they're like, well, I don't have a relationship like that with my brother or sister. And it is unusual, but it's just, it's the way we've worked all this time. And as we get older and we both married, we both have kids, we both have families, obviously, there's a lot more separation than there ever has been because for the longest time, it was kind of just the two of us. We'd our way through life and business. So,
Well, I guess to that point too, one of the things that I've really found surprising is you mentioned, I think it was around ninth grade or something like that. You actually ended up going to military school for a year to kind of just be with Dale there as well. And I don't know many people that would be excited to go to military school, but it's actually something that you asked to do so you could be there for your brother.
I did, and you kinda have to set that up because realizing that he was this little meek kid, headed off to military school, and if you see pictures of us at military school, it's like, kid Dale, so he was very little, very short, very scrawny, and, and again, life at home, your dad and stepmom are gone all the time, it's just you, and what you've known is away and the relationship that we had, so it seemed only natural for me. I know it sounds absurd to so many people, to go do that, but, if you understand the dynamics of all the situation, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I guess in that case, you raced late model a bit. You did some racing yourself, and then you actually started in college for criminal justice before changing to business. I guess what about the business world called to you, and what made you decide that that's where you wanted to make your mark?
I just felt like that criminal justice was pretty limited. I like the investigative side of criminal justice and diving into trying to figure things out. But I don't really remember specifically. I know why I changed to business, and it was just from a broad perspective. It's like, okay, what am I going to study? I'm going to study business, and then I have a minor in production and operations management, which is strange and weird, numbers and that kind of thing. But I'm a very black and white person, so back then it wasn't a strange pick. Marketing to me back then was not something that I was comfortable with and understood. I'm not a salesperson. That kind of thing. I'm just a very black and white. Let the data speak to itself. Let the numbers. Let the process speak for itself. And um, how you come out of that. So I just thought that I could just really have more of a broad major to do a lot of different things, and looking back now, all that worked out for the best.
Very cool. And I guess that's kind of a perfect segue to kind of one of the next things I want to talk to you about. And, you mentioned that, leaving DEI was very difficult for you, and your relationship with Rick Hendrick was really important to that. And the thing that I thought was interesting is you mentioned the marketing a bit, and marketing and PR were actually very central to a lot of what you did business wise. And you had said that when Dale did his contract with Hendrick, you actually wanted to make sure that you still maintain control over the marketing and PR side of things, because you mentioned it wasn't typical for like people to do that. It kind of more went through the race team. I know, like when we
Yeah,
had Elio Castroneves on the show a couple years ago, I had to go through Team Penske in order to get that done.
yeah.
I guess for you, like, what made you understand the true importance of like brand management and identity management? Because that's really vital, honestly.
Well, my dad, they really set things up that way for my dad. And so he really was in control of a lot of his own situations and those types of moments when he drove for Richard Childress Racing and then at Earnhardt Incorporated. The trouble that we had in trying to do for Dale and make our way for Dale and the things that we wanted to control and not do. We just knew going into another team that we wanted to have our finger on that pulse and wanted to be able to make those calls and call those shots. In today's environment, that's really changed a lot because the cohesiveness and the different agendas of people really get in the way in our sport. And
Mhm.
so trying to keep those things more cohesive and now a lot of teams are really wanting to when a driver comes to drive for them, they want to kind of have all of those kinds of things at their hands and control. And I think people are a lot more open to it now too to have the teams involved because it just seems to make a lot more sense. But we really probably mostly because of the experience that we had at Downhard Incorporated, we just knew that we wanted to control those things ourselves. And it was a great move for us. And when you have a good partner to work with, you really don't have to worry about that too much. You work together on it. And it's just that when you have a bad partnership, you want to make sure that those things are in your control.
Right. And I feel like you were a bit ahead of the curve on that, because what was that, like 2007 or 2008 when that change happened? And, like social media and online branding, a lot of stuff has absolutely exploded since then. And I think in a lot of ways that puts you guys ahead of the curve, that you kind of had that foresight to look at that.
Yeah, and it just I mean, we didn't do it for reasons for that, not knowing, but, it certainly was a good timing. I talk about that in my book too, right? They're just good timing and timing on decisions. And sometimes you know why they're happening the way they are, and sometimes you don't. But, yeah, it was a good time in that regard for to set ourselves up that way.
Well, you actually mentioned, talking about decision making in your book, you talked about the idea, and I feel like this is super hard. So, well done on you for being able to do this. But you talk about the idea of removing your own self-interest from a decision in order to be able to make a better decision. I guess in practice, what does that look like for you then, and how you look at and handle a problem if you're trying to just, I guess, look at it from that viewpoint?
Well, I mean, I think that's just kind of the honest way to go about it. Like, if I have my own motive at hand, I'm not gonna, make see a clear decision and a clear path. I mean, I can't make the decision from my angle only. So, removing yourself and looking at it, if you weren't involved in it, what would you want the outcome to be? What would you, want the situation to be? I just, I can't. I mean, it's just the most honest, logical way to look at it. And unfortunately, a lot of people can't do that or can't see that, or, they can't put their own motive or agenda out of the way. And, that can be hard. So, but it's definitely just from nothing else, just an honest, right way to do it.
Well, you'd also mentioned as well, and like I never thought about it like this, Kelly, but you mentioned like also going around to the people that the decision affects and kind of, I guess, like surveying them a bit. And I guess in the way that you've, run JRM Motorsports, like how has that whole thing, worked in, I guess, in action for you guys when you're kind of deciding what to do?
It sort of sounds like you run a business by committee, but it's really not. So I mean, you know, I I just want to ask the questions so that uh, I'm I don't work on the floor with X amount of people every day or understand, so I think it's important that you understand what they're going through, you see it through their lens, you ask the questions, if this were to happen, how would this affect you? If we decide to make this decision, what am I not thinking about? Because I'm only looking at it through my lens, and my lens doesn't touch everything. And so, doing it like that, you learn a lot for one, because you learn, looking at it from a different perspective and thinking of things that you may not have thought of. And that's what I love about it, is that I'm not the smartest person on the block. And collaborating and trying to understand it from soup to nuts, then you can make a better decision at the end of the day as well.
Well, I guess then, like, from that standpoint, like, how do you decide, I guess, who's gonna be, I guess, in your corner is kind of the wrong word, but who's gonna be, like, on that panel of experts for you? Like, how do you decide who's the right person
Ask
for you to
all
get
kinds of
opinion from?
different people. Yeah, I wanna ask, and I don't wanna ask the people that are in my corner either, right?
Right, right.
You want a difference of opinion. You want, different facets of the situation. And, so, yeah, you wanna, survey, and that is sometimes how we go about it the wrong way, right? We ask all our friends. Well, of course, what are your friends gonna say? They're gonna be on your side, right? They're not gonna tell you anything you don't wanna hear, kinda thing. Um, but, so, a diverse group of people with an understanding, is a good audience to kinda test that out. But there's also things that you just can't ask and do. I mean, sometimes you have to make a decision that's in the best, we realize that we can't please everyone. We're not all going to think about things the same. We're not all going to handle things the same. And, you know, and sometimes you just have to make a decision and be confident in that from a management perspective.
Well, you had, I guess, from that idea of making the right decisions for people and kind of making the right decision for them. One of the things that you mentioned that when you're in action performance, you're always really good at is you always thought about like how can I help the sponsor? How can I support the sponsor from my viewpoint? And like in racing, that's super vital to like keeping the team going, keeping everything that you're doing going. I guess from your viewpoint, like how much importance do sponsorships play in racing? And I guess in terms of the economics of running a race team, like how much does it cost to make these things go right? Because I think people just don't have total perspective on like what you guys actually have to do to keep a race team going annually.
Yeah, our race team, from a sponsorship perspective, we run off about, uh, we need about 80% of funding from a sponsorship versus 20% from our prize winnings on the racetrack. So, it takes a lot to do what we do and get the funding that we do. And so that's why it's so important between really, I, I'm going to parlay this to politics, but not in a lot of the same ways. But
Right.
you have a group, or really anything, you have a group of constituents. My constituents are our fans and our sponsors. And so, trying to um, do what's in their best interest, do something that they're going to engage in. It's no different than when we started this conversation. I said, let's talk about what you want to talk to that's for your audience. You know your audience best, right? And so, understanding the fans, understanding the sponsors, understanding what their needs are, is really important to making this team go round because, that's what keeps us on the racetrack and keeps us going in the right direction and staying on track. So, uh, and, when we sit down with sponsors, that's what we want to know. Why, what do you want out of this? What assets are you trying to drive, so on and so forth? And then we can plug and play. A lot of people will sit down and say, okay, this is just what we have to offer you.
Mm,
Well, what if none of those things fit?
right.
So you want to listen to them and you want to understand what are they trying to achieve and then think through, okay, what assets do we have to achieve that? Maybe there are some of the ones in the list of 10, but maybe they're not. Maybe we have to think outside of the box and think more creative about maybe how we make something work.
Where did you learn to do that from? Because you had mentioned in the book that the fans and sponsors were 2 things you learned right away were, like, super important, but I guess where do you feel like you picked that up?
Really from my dad. I mean, that was always something that was super important to him, something that he always kept at the forefront of all of his decisions and all of his interactions. And so that kind of aiming for the win-win that I talk about in the book from finding a win-win on both sides is really from him and knowing, the fans and the sponsors and how they were so important to the sport even back then to now. And so I give a lot of credit to dad when it comes to that was something that I always remember him talking so much about and understanding from him.
Absolutely. Well, you had mentioned as well, you mentioned working with your brother and, that being a family situation, but you also mentioned, and you talked about this a bit in your book, you talked about when Tony Sr. had to be let go from the racing team because it just wasn't a great fit. I guess in terms of like looking at things with a family perspective, because I know my wife's my business partner and we work pretty well together, but I guess is it harder, easier? Like how do you make those things work? Because sometimes, the dynamic does come home with you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it does. My husband and I are the same way. We both work here at Junior Motorsports and we're constantly I feel like we're constantly working because at home we're still having conversations about work. Um, Setting some boundaries around that is always a good thing, but it's not
We
always.
we do the same thing. We're like, this time of night, it gets shut off.
But, and that's the hard thing about working with family is to, keep the relationships separate, and I think that, sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't when you can keep the personal relationship versus the business relationship, and the reasons why you would make a decision one way or the other, and, it just takes a lot of maturity and experience and respect between people to be able to make that happen, and to go on about your relationship outside of work if you've had a problem with your relationship, inside of work, and not everybody can do that and achieve that, and it's something that's pretty. It's fairly difficult. But it'd be way more harder, like in a me and Dale situation or me and my husband situation, than it would be, um, somebody else that was related to you. Just because, like you said, you got to go home with her.
Right. And that situation, sometimes you really need to clear that up, and we have had
Uh,
situations like that, so I totally get
yeah,
it. Well, I guess, like, in like I said, I really enjoyed this book, just being a racing fan myself. I guess from your standpoint, like, yes, you put this out because you wanna help people and, you wanna get attention for what you're doing, but I guess at the same time, there's also a benefit to you from just putting it together. And I
yeah.
guess in that standpoint, how did this book serve you in the process of just creating it?
Yeah, really, the reason I wanted to write the book, started the process 18, 19 months ago, and the publisher of Dell's book said, "You have you ever thought about writing a book?" And I really had not thought about writing it, but I said, if I did want to write a book, this is what I'd want to talk about, and I'd want to talk about my relationship with my dad, because I want people the the interactions that we have with fans and all that, they'll say to me all the time, "Your dad was so great, so great." And in the back of my mind, I'm like, "He was a great race car driver," but I have all these conflicting messages popping up in my head, about him as a dad. And so I just wanted to share that with people so that it was out there. And that was kind of part of my healing process and my own therapy process of kind of wrapping a bow on that and being okay with that. And then she said, you really should think about the business aspect of your experience and how that could help people. And I talked earlier to someone about, that they asked me if now and then when I passed, what do I want people to remember or think about me in this capacity? And I said, I want people to know they matter. And when I'm dead, I want them to say, Kelly made me feel really good. She made me feel like I mattered. I was worth something. I was worth talking to, I was worth being cared about. And that's why I wrote the book too, because I feel like that kind of message, that vulnerability and that message comes out in just how honest and, you feel like you're just kinda having a conversation with me, I feel like, from the book. And it's just kinda real down to earth, and it's not this blueprint. It's always even the things I talk about in the book will be forever changing, so that's really why I wanted to do the book was for all of those reasons, and ultimately, just if somebody scoops a little nugget from it, then that's great.
Well, I guess, like you mentioned, your dad's passing, Kelly, and that event in the racing world, it changed a lot of things. And I guess from the standpoint of like Dale Sr. was at the top of the racing world at that point in time. And, they were fighting for, I think it was like second and third at that point in
Yep.
the race. And it wasn't that, like NASCAR had always paid attention to safety, but I don't think to that level until that happened because the sport hadn't lost somebody of his caliber. So I guess from your perspective, I know we had the Hans device coming in. We were looking at the safer barriers and stuff like that. Do you feel like that racing has done a better job handling driver safety, since that happened with your dad? Because from my perspective, I think even we saw what happened at Ryan Newman in Daytona this year, and he walked away.
Yeah.
So well, after several days walked away. But like, do you think
Still.
racing has done a better job handling the drivers now?
Yeah, I think they definitely have, and, it's kind of unfortunate that it took something of that magnitude to make it happen, but,
Right.
they definitely, have come a long ways. It's something they pay attention to, and even now, like, after an accident with Ryan, even though he pretty much come away unscathed, they still take that car and they look at things and they look at all the metrics and all the data and see if there's anything else they can do, because he was in the hospital for a certain amount of days or this, that, and the other. So, it's something that's kind of continuous, which is really awesome to see. And people ask me now, would you ever just want to get in the race car and, go take a couple laps? And I'm like, you don't know how difficult that is these days with the safety enhancements and with everything, driving a late model and jumping in my old late model that I used to jump in and jumping in one of these cars now is just so totally different from a technology standpoint and safety standpoint that it's doggone near impossible. You got to get pretty familiar with what's happening.
Yeah, I was listening to MRN radio, I think that night, and they were talking about, like, Newman's car was already in Charlotte, like, that evening, and I think it's just to see your sport have a commitment to the drivers, which really are, the most important part of the sport is just a really vital thing, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, and, they've extended it, to the crews and the helmets and the procedures on pit road and things like that, the speeds, even the fans, because a few years ago, we had a car go up in the grandstands at Daytona and some of the improvements and things that they made there as well. So, obviously, we have a very dangerous sport,
Mhm.
inherently dangerous, and, but whatever you can do to make it the safest that you can is prudent, it's something that we should be doing.
Absolutely. Well, Kelly, we've been handling, some very weird times right now. We've had a lot of the iRacing and stuff like that happening. And I know motorsports are hopefully going to start up again soon. But I guess, that aside, where do you see, I guess, motorsports going in the next 5 or 10 years? Because we have seen the car bodies change. We've seen a lot of stuff change. I guess from your perspective, where do you see it going?
Well, I wish we had a crystal ball so we could figure out where we need to be, right?
Right.
I think NASCAR's done a good job. I think you saw a lot of momentum in the last half of the season and moving into this season with the TV viewers and the fans and the engagement that the sport has been receiving. And really, it'll be interesting to see coming out of this break what iRacing has done because they're talking about so many unique streamers and unique visits that people. I even saw a comparison to the iRacing stream versus so many people, hundreds of thousands of people that would never watch a NASCAR race or watching the virtual racing. So, it'll be interesting to see if that parlays over into, when we get back on the track. But, just the collectiveness and the collaboration that NASCAR's really been doing with the teams and, the fan council and the motorsport tracks to really try to, um, work more closely together on what the sport looks like and the changes that they wanna make and so on and so forth, I think are productive and helpful. Who knows what it looks like? I mean, but I think what's important, and you talked about this just in 2007 when we wanted to bring everything under our own control and our own roof. The thing that's important about all of these decisions and transition is just being able to adapt, right?
Mhm.
And being flexible, being open-minded, so that you can look at things and adapt to what needs to be changed or something, the way something's going and handling. I mean, who knew 10 years ago we'd be in the middle of social media the way we are and using it the way we are and consuming things the way we are. And so being able to adapt to that and adjust to that is what's really important so that you don't fall by the wayside.
I guess from the iRacing perspective, the thing that's been cool for me is it's given us more of a glimpse into the drivers' lives. Like I think even Jamie McMurray's daughter has become a little bit of a celebrity because she keeps popping up in the different races too, which has been kind of cool.
Yeah, you get to see their personalities and they get to have a little fun with it, too. So that's always nice. And they've been able to treat that as something fun, which on race day at the racetrack, tensions are high, expectations are high, and so on and so forth. So maybe you don't see as much of that. But I think a lot of the drivers do, though, throughout the week, show a lot of personality and get to show off their families if they want to and things like that so that you can try to get to know them better. But you're right, yeah. I think what was it, Denny Hamlin this past weekend, I guess maybe his daughter did something
It was
to
a headline on Fox News this morning. She ran in and lost in the race.
yeah, it made him so like how often does that happen?
Well, I guess, Kelly, just as we're running a little bit low on time here, if we were to take a look at something you believed at 21 that you don't believe now, what would you say that is?
Something that I believed at when I was 21, oh gosh. Um, Something that I believed at age 21 that I don't think now. Oh gosh, I don't know. It's such a hard question to look back because experience and perspective and age change you so much, right?
Right.
So you want to say, "Oh, well, I should have been drinking at 21 or whatever." But then I look at my 19-year-old and I go, "I was you once. I know what you're doing." Um, gosh, I don't know, probably I for me, when I look back at my life, I wish I would have been more present
Mm,
in moments. I was the kind of person that always looked ahead. What's next? What do I have to do next, fix next, achieve next, conquer next, whatever? And I realize, trying to look back and have memories is really tough when you're not present and when you're not in the moment. And so probably that,
very cool.
don't
If we were far in the future, Kelly, and you could sum up your legacy with a quote on your tombstone, what does that look like?
that she always made people matter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Kelly, this has been awesome. Once again, the book is Drive 9 Lessons to Win in Business and in Life. And as I said, I literally just finished it this morning. So I really recommend everybody go out and pick it up. Where can they find out more about you and more about everything you're doing, Kelly?
Yeah, so they can go to kellyearnhardtdrive.com and they can find out information where they can purchase the book right now. One thing I didn't talk about in my book was consistency because my social media handles, all three are different. On Instagram, I'm Kelly Earnhardt Miller. On Facebook, I'm Kelly K. Earnhardt. And on Twitter, I'm Earnhardt Kelly. So follow us there. Junior Motorsports, we're on social as well if you want to find out more about the race team. And yeah,
Awesome. Well, Kelly Earnhardt Miller, thank you so much for hanging out with me today on the Create Your Own Life show.
thank you. I enjoyed it.